चलता है? हाँ चलता है. Hello sir. Hello sir. How are you? Yeah. Okay. But Suhas, like this? Huh? Oh, then it'll switch off. Yeah.
Good evening to all of you. I'm Suhas Borker, the trustee of IIC, and we're going to have a very interesting talk today by Rahul Sud. Now we go back, we were in fact in school together, and I met him a few days back after nearly 53 years, because we were also in college, but he was doing physics at St. Stephen's and I was doing history. But we never met because the science types are different from the arts types. And then, but this guy has been brilliant right from school, So I regard, though he didn't come, he was not given the first place in the All India Higher Secondary, but he virtually topped, And then he joined St. Stephen's and he did his BSc honors in physics, and he got the gold medal of the University of Delhi. And I think the record still stands, is it? Yes, it's that kind of record he established. And then Rahul goes up to first to Florida, isn't it? And then to Berkeley for his MSc, and then he goes to Stanford for his PhD, and then of course in 1983 he starts this big venture as a co-founder. So it's been a brilliant journey, and we are very happy that he is with us. He's flown in from Milan, where he's based at the moment, and he's joined us specially for this. So I just want to flag a few points before I give the floor to Rahul. You see, Eric Hobsbawm, in his book, The New Century, says that India will be one of the most prosperous and enlightened countries in the new century because of its ancient intellectual and philosophical basis on which something substantial can be built for the modern world. And I think Rahul here, though he's no longer an Indian citizen, but he has a OCI card. So, but he still represents that, that milieu, that value system which Eric Hobsbawm talks of. And then I also hope that he drives us to semiconductor sovereignty. That means we control the future of what we make, That's a concept which I think you will just delve on. Now I won't go into the because I had to read up quite a lot to get to the level of this guy, you see. So, of neuromorphic computing and all that, AI and all that, but I'm not going to delve on that. Now, the other thing I just want to flag is, you see, way back in when Gandhi is writing his Hind Swaraj, he talks of as men progress, they shall be able to travel in airships and reach any part of the world in a few hours And that, of course, you did that. Men will not need the use of their hands and feet. They will press a button and they will have their clothing by their side. They'll press another button and they'll have their newspapers. A third, they'll press and a motor car will be in waiting for them. They'll have a variety of delicately dished up food. Everything will be done by machinery. Now that's Gandhi writing in 1909. Is that correct? Yeah, in Hind Swaraj. Now, the other thing which I wanted to flag was Nehru's discovery of India. So Nehru is also, looking much ahead of his times, and it's not in the same syntax as through plastic surgery, Ganesha growing his trunk. We are not into that paradigm. So it's real time we are talking of. And then he says science gives power, but remains impersonal, purposeless, and almost unconcerned with our application of the knowledge it puts at our disposal. It may continue with its triumph, and yet, if it ignores nature too much, nature may play a subtle revenge upon it. While life seems to grow in outward stature, it may ebb away inside for lack of something yet undiscovered by science. So, I think this technology which Rahul is going to talk about takes us leaps and bounds, across time. So, with that, I'll now request Rahul to please take the podium.
Chairman Borker, distinguished members of the audience, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for inviting me to share my perspectives on the semiconductor industry. They're strictly my personal perspectives, and I hope you will use it as food for thought and find some provocation as well. Starting with the title, which is itself somewhat provocative, but it is quite possible that this may happen, and I'll try to explain why. So this was on the cover of The Economist. Is data the oil of the digital era? This was quite some time back. And if you look at the state of the semiconductor market, it is likely to exceed the oil market within the next 7 to 10 years. There are other geopolitical activities happening which are not necessarily relevant to the semiconductor industry, but in many ways they are. The petrodollar, is it coming to an end? There are many signs. So first of all, just on the technical side, where is all this data used? All of this data that you see, when you talk about artificial intelligence, cloud computing, and whatever, even banking, all this information is stored in semiconductor memory. Semiconductor memory happens to be 35% of a $660 billion market today. And artificial intelligence, this is a much hyped buzzword today. It's all basically about comparison of stored data and incoming data, and a compute engine that compares the incoming data to the stored data to derive a decision. And this decision can only be made by the data that's actually stored. ChatGPT, for example, works on exactly this principle. There are other important things that are happening in the world. In terms of purchasing power parity, Russia is now the 4th economy in the world. India is the 3rd. And soon this chart may change again, but this happened just recently. So a famous banker famously said, gold is the only thing that's valuable. Everything else is credit. So in fact, a rupee note or a dollar note is basically a credit note. So there are comparisons being made to crude oil, gold, and semiconductors. And in fact, after a long time, there seems to be some drive to return to the gold standard. Now, what does all this have to do with semiconductors? I'll try to get into that. So, many people speculate, are we close to the end of the petrodollar? Well, for sure, India does not buy oil in rupees anymore, in dollars anymore. India is buying oil in rupees. Saudi Arabia is accepting payments for oil in local currency, the yuan, for example, but also other local currencies. Taiwan happens to be to semiconductors what Saudi Arabia is to oil. Taiwan is the world's single largest manufacturer of semiconductors. Without Taiwan's Semiconductor Manufacturing Corporation, which holds 60% of the world manufacturing market, there would be no Apple phones. There would be no Android phones. NVIDIA, which now has a market capitalization higher than Apple, would not exist. Broadcom would not exist, so we would have no Wi-Fi and Ethernet. Qualcomm, which is the processor for every cell phone, would not exist. These are 30, 40. NVIDIA this year will be a $100 billion company. But NVIDIA is a design company. They call it fabless company. New markets, cryptocurrency, you might have heard of it. We'll talk a bit more about it during the talk. Then there are questions which arise. Will China retake Taiwan? Well, if you actually do a little bit of research, you will find that there are only 7 or 8 countries that actually officially recognize Taiwan. So, US, Europe, most of Asia, I'm not sure about India actually, but Taiwan is not recognized officially by most of the important countries in the world. Countries like Haiti and small countries recognize Taiwan. So, yes. So, cryptocurrency and central bank digital currency. You may or may not have heard of these terms, but they use blockchain technology, and this is likely the currency of the future. In order to mine cryptocurrency, computers must resolve very complex equations. That's why they require entire server farms. Most of the world's server farms for crypto mining they happen to be in a country that hardly anybody knows about called Kazakhstan. 24% of the world's crypto mining is in Kazakhstan for one simple reason. It has cheap electricity. Because these millions and millions, hundreds of millions of acres of server farms, they consume a huge amount of energy, almost more than multiple cities. And so it requires massive compute power, and that's all about semiconductors. The government of India has come out with, I think many of you from your local bank might have been exposed to the digital rupee. And they promote various advantages of it, but this is a sign of the things to come. Now, there is a difference between Bitcoin and central bank digital currency, because central bank digital currency is controlled by the Reserve Bank of India in this case. In the case of the euro, the central bank of in Brussels, European Central Bank controls it. But in case of Bitcoin, no one controls it actually. There is no bank required to make a transaction. So this is sort of a view of what is likely to happen. Some people refer to it as decentralized finance, DeFi, DEFI. So this is just a little picture of the sunset in Kazakhstan. So semiconductors and electricity. Here's a data center mining services company in Kazakhstan. So if you think that this is all hocus pocus, AXA, one of the world's largest insurance company, officially accepts in Switzerland, they accept Bitcoin as currency. Both campaigns in the United States, the Republican and the Democratic Party, they accept donations to the election campaign in cryptocurrency, especially in Bitcoin. So artificial intelligence is very much required. The chips that are used in artificial intelligence, for example, NVIDIA chips, they are also used for cryptocurrency mining in Bitcoin. So these are just some pretty pictures of, I mean, this is a memory chip, this is a processor chip, but you can see inside the processor chip, there is also at least half of the chip is actually memory. This is memory, this is memory, this is memory. All the regular blocks are memories. So people say this will be bigger than the internet revolution. Who knows? But people latch on to the buzzword of the day, and we'll see what happens. So that was just a quick introduction to the main topic, somewhat provocative introduction, but let me get to the main topic at hand. First of all, I'll try to give you a little bit of a flavor for what is a semiconductor, because I don't know how technical the audience is. And other than Dr. Zarabi, who I was very pleased to meet, he was actually the CMD of Semiconductor Complex, which was India's very first semiconductor initiative. But I will assume that most of the audience is not familiar with what a semiconductor is. Anybody who is? Okay, many people are. Well, you're all owners of hundreds of chips. Your car itself has hundreds of chips. So even if you don't realize it, your cell phone itself is only chips. The rest is a box. So all these things use chips. And you can see here, this is McKinsey's chart. They are talking about semiconductors being $1 trillion market in 2030. So this is, depending on the price of oil, whether it's $100 a barrel, on the average it's been $40, $50. The price of oil, the value of the oil market could vary between 1 trillion and 2 trillion. Okay, so semiconductors are getting on the order of the oil market, and the semiconductors are basically is like a three-legged stool. You have compute and analog, which is basically the microprocessors. You have power semiconductors, which drive your electric car and stuff. You have memory. Just like human beings, there can be no computer without memory. So this is an industry which is characterized by hard science, brutal capital investment. You cannot think of building a semiconductor factory, at least not on the advanced nodes, for less than $25 or $30 billion. And if it were me, I would raise not less than 40 billion, because you need 10 billion just to keep the running costs until you start to make a profit running some product. Okay. So, and complexity. So it's an intersection of hard science, brutal capital investment, and complexity. It entails everything which is difficult. And just so you know, this industry was born around 1958, and the first market for semiconductors was actually a nuclear missile. And this was born in Silicon Valley. Today, semiconductors are in everything. I say everything because I can't think of anything. I mean, even the microphones and the audiovisual system is all chips. And there are future applications which are 100% basically data centers, which is semiconductor memory. So people are familiar with the war in Ukraine. They're familiar with the war in the Middle East. Maybe they're not so familiar with the war that's going on. There's another war that's going on, which is on semiconductors. Semiconductors have always been at the center of geopolitics, and many battles have been fought over semiconductors, starting from when Japan used to be very important. Japan has gone down now for various reasons. This was a cover on The Economist. A book has recently been written, in case people are interested, by a historian called Chip Wars, by a American professor in Tufts University. So it's a very, why are chips important? Well, they're very important to national security. You cannot build a single weapon system without chips. And it so happens that in India, the chip production is exactly zero. Okay, there may be, Bell Labs has a 3-inch or 4-inch wafer factory that may be building some odds and ends, but for all practical purposes, there is no semiconductor industry in India, except for body rental, which is the same as software, which is the complexity of chip design. There are a few 30, 40,000 people working for European and United States companies. But they have very limited knowledge, which is limited to design itself, and most of them have never seen a semiconductor factory. So people talk about semiconductors as the new oil. Oil was a crucial resource for industrialization and economic development in the past. Semiconductors are now the new force behind industrialization as well as innovation. So semiconductors are basically critical infrastructure. $1 trillion of investment is expected to go into semiconductor fabs, because suddenly the United States and Europe have woken up to the fact that they have literally lost the semiconductor industry, and most of it has moved to Asia. So there is a big frenzy for one simple reason, that the global balance of power, weapon systems, national defense, national security, fully depends on chips. And this is the reason China is investing hundreds of billions. So what are the strategic assets of a nation? Starting with the economy, to jobs, to industry, to military and aerospace, internet, artificial, all these things, they start at the bottom of the pyramid of something much smaller, memory and microprocessor and the semiconductor industry. This is the basis of this entire inverted pyramid. So there is a fight for dominance for this industry because of these reasons. And let me try to show you some pretty pictures of what a semiconductor factory looks like. So China has superpower ambitions for sure, and they have invested, they have recently created the third phase of a $47 billion fund to invest in the semiconductor industry in the coming years. These are 3 Chinese factories that have recently been invested. SMIC is based in Shanghai. One of these is based in Wuhan. They make flash memory, which is basically your USB memory stick. It's a huge market because there is no mobile device without it. It stores the data. DRAM is in every data center. Just these 2 products alone comprise about a $500 billion market in the coming years. Today they are $200 billion, but they are growing exponentially. So you can see here at the advanced nodes, less than 10 nanometers. Does everybody know what a nanometer is? It's 1/1000th of a meter. I'll explain more what it is. But 63% of the world's production is in Taiwan. Samsung and Hyundai started to invest in this industry also very aggressively. So today they are the absolute world leaders. It's not United States, it's not Europe. So this chart is from McKinsey. So due to the geopolitics, the European Union has allocated $50 billion of government money to invest in semiconductors. Similarly, United States, by the CHIPS Act, has recently approved $50 billion. So between Europe and US, that's $100 billion, which is not much because $50 billion is barely enough to build 1 factory. Okay, so if they really want to get back into it, they'll have to wake up and invest a lot more. We'll see what happens. So this is one machine that is used in the factory. This is what prints the 3 nanometer lines. This is about the size of a school bus, this equipment. One machine costs between, well, an acceptable machine is not less than 200 million. And to start with, you need about a dozen of those in a factory. Plasma deposition systems. These are made by Applied Materials, a US company. It costs anywhere from 30 to 50 million. Etching systems. Again, very expensive equipment. Just the building alone will cost you around $1 billion to build because it's very clean room space and so forth. This is what the inside of a factory looks like. It has a yellow light because you are using photolithographic resist to print those very, very narrow lines. This is a factory where some workers are holding the wafers, silicon wafers. These are 12-inch wafers, about the size of a pizza. And around 100 NVIDIA chips can fit into one wafer. Then once you produce them, there's a certain yield. And maybe 10 of them are good, maybe 50% are good. So the factory's efficiency depends on how clean it is and how well managed their processes are. Okay, so what does it take to build a semiconductor factory? So 3 nanometers is today the state of the art. Apple chips today, the A14, A15 processors are built on 3 nanometer chips. TSMC, Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Corporation. The electricity consumed by this factory, which is about 1 million acres, 10 million gallons per day of water. It's about the well, actually this should refer to electricity. The capital invested was 35 billion. Even they have a big challenge because they're a small country. They don't have trained engineers to staff everything that they're trying to do. So you need, of course, the right product to run, but they have customers which they have built up over a long period of time. So they have Apple, they have NVIDIA, they have Broadcom, Qualcomm. So they have product to run. But if we were to build a fab, which product are we going to run? Is Apple going to come to us? It's unlikely. Not in the short term. So meanwhile, you have to sustain losses. Just the depreciation of a $35 billion investment is hundreds of millions a month. So to give you an idea of the complexity of, let's say, a memory chip, what kind of people do you need? Well, it's like a three-legged stool. If any one of them is missing or does not do a good job, and by the way, 85% of the chips, when I was an engineering manager at Intel, I checked all the chips that Intel had designed in the last many years. And I discovered that 85% of the chips did not work. Only 15% went to the market. So this will help you understand why. First of all, there is physics, atomic physics involved. There is computer architecture, circuit design, firmware, and software also involved. Then there is test and product engineering, design verification, post-silicon validation. So finding an engineer that has a bird's eye view of all these things is very rare. Some people are specialized in physics, some people are specialized in this, some people are specialized in design. In India, we have lots of designers, but they only understand a part of the design process, which is what is outsourced to them by ST Microelectronics, for example, which has a big design center in Noida. I actually built that design center for ST Microelectronics. They have 3,000 people, but do they understand all these things? No. Their understanding is limited to the job that the divisions in Geneva or other parts of the world in ST Microelectronics outsource to them, which are limited pieces of activity. So semiconductor memory is the base of all chips, by the way. And these are all the places. I won't bore you with all the details, but these are all the places. But for example, in a processor, in a CPU, you have registers, you have cache, you have level 1, 2, 3 cache, you have main memory, you have DRAM, which is on the chip as well as in the data centers. Then you have secondary storage in the data center, which is flash memory. Then you have the hard disk. Okay? Without memory, internet would not run, artificial intelligence would not run, no chip would work. So here is something that you might be familiar with, the name of NVIDIA. So NVIDIA had sales of 25 billion last year. They're on track to do 100 billion in sales, one company, producing in Taiwan at Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company. This is the NVIDIA chip. It's made on a 4 nanometer process, 3 nanometer process. TSMC's process node, they have a code name for it called 4N process. It has 80 billion transistors, 80 billion. The size of this chip is less than 1 centimeter. And this chip sells for $40,000 each. So now you can understand why NVIDIA is very successful. But you know, they started out making graphics processor chips called GPUs, which are very good at what is known as matrix multiplication. Matrix multiplication is multiplying many things together. So it's a lot of parallel computing. This is a memory chip. I have personally designed many such chips. This is a 16 gigabit DRAM, which is about the state of the art. That means it has 16 billion bits inside. That's your one memory, and your data center and your server has hundreds of thousands and millions and hundreds of millions of such chips. So that's why it's a huge market. So it has at least 16 billion chips, transistors, but more. And I'll show you what one memory cell looks like. So this is a DRAM cell. This is one transistor and one capacitor. For those of you who know electrical engineering, this is a switch. This is a capacitor. Some charge is stored over here. When you turn on this switch, the charge flows to a data line, and that's how the memory is read and written into. Okay, that might sound like hocus pocus, but DRAM cells used to look like this. This is the transistor physically. This is the capacitor. They have evolved. They tried to make them smaller and smaller and smaller. Now they look like this. They have gone vertical to make them smaller. The state of the art 30, 40 years ago was 16 kilobit DRAM. Today it is 16 gigabit. So we are going vertical now on chips to get them smaller. So what I just showed you which is basically this. Looks like this. And these are few nanometer lines. These are many of them together. This is one capacitor. This is one transistor. This is another capacitor. This is another transistor. They are basically schematically represented by this. So that gives you a little bit of a flavor of what the DRAM looks like. To give you a perspective on how difficult this is to manufacture, this is the Burj Khalifa in Dubai, the world's tallest building. This has an aspect ratio of 6:1. The DRAM cell has an aspect ratio of 60:1. These are the plates of the capacitor, and this is the oxide inside. So transistors have gone from 10 micron, 6 micron, 3 microns. Micron means millionth of a meter. Today we are at 3 nanometers, which means 3. So we went from 3 micron in 1977 to 3 nanometers. So you can imagine the complexity, how it has increased, because the chip size is still always under 1 centimeter. So what is a nanometer? Well, a strand of human DNA is 2.5 nanometers. A human hair is approximately 80,000 to 100,000 nanometers. So 5 nanometers is about 15 silicon atoms. This is what transistors started looking like. When I started designing, they used to look like this. Then we have to go vertical to get more efficient transistors with less space. Now we are doing gate all around. So the Apple process right now actually looks like this, which are multiple transistors stacked on top of each other. And the next step is to go to this type of a transistor. Okay. So as you can imagine, lots of money has been made and lost in the semiconductor industry, and Silicon Valley venture capitalists, followed by the rest of the world's venture capitalists. This has been a very active area of investment by the venture capital industry. So this is from year 2000 until, what is this number? Yeah. So this is the number of deals. So you can see this is 364 deals in 2020. But you can say this goes in cycles depending on the buzzword of the day. So it goes, on the average, there are roughly 100 to 120 semiconductor venture capital investments per year in the last, let's say, since 1980 onwards, which is 44 years. The deals have averaged around 1,000 deals, to be conservative, per year. So you can imagine how many thousands of semiconductor companies the world has invested in. These are the numbers for the last few years. In 2022, there were around $6 billion was invested. This year it's come down to slightly under $2 billion. Number of deals, again, you can see, is quite large. So what is the success rate of semiconductor venture capital investments? You might ask, because it's hundreds of billions of dollars has been invested. So of all the semiconductor venture capital deals ever made, these are the companies from 1951 until 1995, and there has been no successful company thereafter. Or at least successful, it depends on how you define successful, okay? Because venture capital success is they buy low and sell high. So it's a trade for them. They want to invest $1 and get $10 back. Well, if that's the definition of success, many venture capitalists made a lot of money by putting together a few people with a business plan and selling it to Broadcom or NVIDIA or somebody else. But they never made a product. They hired a bunch of engineers, basically. But the venture capitalists made money. But are there existing companies today that survive as independent, profitable companies? That's the entire list. So that's the entire list out of over 5,000 startups invested in, hundreds of billions. The United Kingdom has a record. Other than ARM, they don't have a single existing company in semiconductors, yet they have invested in thousands. So there's one UK company, which is ARM. That's it. Some people call this, okay, this is back to why semiconductors are important. This is the CEO of NVIDIA talking recently. $1 trillion of data center infrastructure has to be transitioned to generative AI applications, which means buying a lot of artificial intelligence chips. Semiconductors is what digital transformation is built upon. It's the backbone. So now, why am I showing this? Do you recognize these faces? This is Lionel Messi. Maybe Virat Kohli should be here. But these are, let's say, winning or losing in professional sports. Many people have compared the semiconductor industry. My former boss used to do it. And he says semiconductor industry is like professional sports, because winning or losing depends on the few superstars that have some native singular talent to get the team to win. So we are an industry of superstars, he used to say. And, well, I took his advice literally. When the company I founded, which was called Lattice Semiconductor, I founded this in 1983. The company was less than a few days old. This was a half-page advertisement in the Oregonian local newspaper. I was in Portland, Oregon. So what does it say? We are looking for superstars. And I wrote this advertisement myself. It was just a text advertisement. I didn't have money to hire an ad agency. But it said the points that, and we got 4,000 responses. So we are looking for people of singular talent. Creative people who are sure of their abilities. Lattice is a semiconductor design firm that breaks with industry tradition. We believe, and I have to say, experience has verified this to be true, and if Lattice exists today, it is because of this philosophy that I religiously followed. We believe that no arsenal of resources can outgun a creative mind inspired by a stimulating yet free atmosphere. So the company had basically a total of 2 employees at the time, myself and a journalist who I had recruited to prepare papers. I later named him co-founder. His name was Raymond Capis. He made a good contribution in doing the PR and stuff. Because you need a lot of PR when you start out. Why? Because otherwise nobody hears about you, the investors won't give you any money. We certainly didn't have government support. So this is the exact date of this advertisement. And, oh, this is what I used to look like at the time. And you can see, this is my badge. I still have it. Employee number 0001. And so if you count from May 1983 until October 17, 1986, it was not a very long time from the day we had 1 employee to this was the most important conference in the semiconductor industry. It was in San Diego, California. And I was invited to be a speaker, and the title of my speech was The Revolution in Programmable Logic Devices. The company still exists today. Not only does it exist, but these are the financials of 2022. 2023 is even better. We won the award for the most profitable semiconductor company in the world. You can see here, it says the net income. Is this working? Close to $200 million of net income. So although the company is not very large, I mean, it's just under $1 billion. I mean, compared to all those large companies like Intel and NVIDIA, we are nothing. Yet, our profits exceed theirs. Our profits exceed those of Intel last year. So, then what happened? This was an executive order issued by the White House. The Chinese tried to buy Lattice. And I was very pleased when the President of the United States took an executive decision and an executive order on 13th September 2017. You can find this on the White House website. The sale was blocked. Today, consistent with the administration's commitment to take all actions necessary to protection of the United States national security, the President issued an order prohibiting the acquisition of Lattice Semiconductor Corporation. So I'm pleased that it's not Chinese. So how is it that 5,000 companies were invested in by venture capitalists? And there is only like 11 still existing in all those years, of which I'm proud that one of them is the one I founded. So this is my experience with 95% of venture capitalists. First of all, what is a venture capitalist? They're not investing their own money. They raise money, they're MBA types, they raise money from pension funds, and they become a venture capitalist. And they look for startups. They're looking for the next Intel or the next Apple. And so they invest in the buzzword of the day. They say, yeah, artificial intelligence, NVIDIA is very successful. We want to invest in artificial intelligence. But they don't know what artificial intelligence is. They invest in hi-fi corporate managers from big companies. Now, do you know how you become a corporate vice president in a big company? I think almost all of you would know. How do you become a corporate vice president? You have to please your boss. If you don't please your boss, for sure he's not going to appoint you in that position. So, but venture capitalists, they tend to hire big corporate managers, and they want to see a complete team. They want to see the marketing and sales guy there before they invest. Now, why do you need a marketing and sales guy when you have no product to sell? But that's their philosophy. You want to see it. They have a model that they follow, a textbook model of venture capital. It does not work. In fact, Lattice did not start with a venture capitalist. They all said no to me. All the Silicon Valley pundits, they said, Lattice Semiconductor, oh, they are smoking something in Oregon. So I raised money from the local 7-Eleven chain, grocery store CEOs. He invested $100,000. The local sandwich shop invested $100,000. So I raised about $1 million from just some local people to start. And I never got a single penny from the Silicon Valley venture capitalists. Yet, none of the Silicon Valley venture capitalist companies exist today, at least 5 or 6 of those in that short list I gave you. There's very few that started with venture capital. So, of course, they like to tell the CEO what to do every day. Now, I can guarantee you, if I was told what to do every day, I don't have a very good relation with authority. I would have stopped working. Plus, they would never have allowed me to take decisions which I took, which were kind of revolutionary at the time. And of course, in the end, they pray, and unfortunately, nobody answers their prayers. So here's an example of Intel Corporation. They're supposed to know a lot about semiconductors, right? So they have a division called Intel Capital, which is the world's largest venture capitalist. And they, in their wisdom, in the last 5, 7, 10 years, they have invested 3.5 billion plus. So there was a company called Nirvana. First Intel Capital invested 10, 20 million. Then after they grew their engineering headcount to 100 plus people, they said, oh, we want to get into artificial intelligence. They bought the company for 400 million, but the company had no products and no sales. Here's another company, here's another company, here's another company, and there are many more. This is the world's largest venture capitalist, the division of one of the world's greatest semiconductor companies. So obviously, they do not have the wisdom to invest. Find the entrepreneurs, because how do you tell somebody is an entrepreneur? Well, my grocery store and timber company investors, the first $1 million, that's the hardest to get. After I gave my presentation to them, and I had to grow a beard to look a bit older, I made my presentation. Then the head of the timber company got up and said, Rahul, I didn't understand shit about what you said. So I said, oh, well, I'd been trying to raise money for a long time. I'd left my job at Intel. Nobody gave me any money. and I was ready to update my resume. Then he said, but I like the look in your eyes, so I'm going to put down $200,000. Well, for that $200,000, he made several $100 million. But did he have any means of judging anything about whether I could build a successful company? Apparently, the look in my eyes is what convinced him. And the rest of the people followed him. The sandwich shop guy, the grocery store guy, and all the other guys. But this is the problem with formal, committee-driven venture capital. They never look the entrepreneur in the eye to determine the emotional engines that drive success. So the hardest thing to find, I would say, is the entrepreneur. And I call them scientipreneurs, science entrepreneurs. Do you know that every one of the founders of that short list that I showed you, every one of them, so Gordon Moore was a PhD in chemistry, founder of Intel. Bob Noyce was a PhD in physics, founder of Intel. These are the two founders of Intel. And they created they created Silicon Valley, in fact. So success is very much, Steve Jobs, would anybody have invested in Steve Jobs? He did not have a college degree. He did not have a business plan. He didn't know how to write one. He didn't know how to draft a balance sheet or an income statement, which is what venture capitalists want you to give them. They want a 200-page business plan, and then they'll give you a 200-page contract to sign, which says basically, we own and control everything, and you are just a slave. A real entrepreneur would never work for them. It defeats the purpose of being an entrepreneur. So Steve Jobs had no college education. He was 2 years in a community college, and his main strength was he learned how to do calligraphy, which later showed up on a Mac. So no venture capitalist invested in Steve Jobs. He founded the company with Wozniak, and then later Arthur Rock, who was one of the investors of Intel. He was a single guy. He was the world's first venture guy, but he was one person, and he went and looked at Steve Jobs, and he put down his money. But those kind of venture capitalists are very few, because they are committee-driven today. They take other people's money. This guy was investing his own money. So that was, so now that was a little bit of an introduction to semiconductors. Now, how about India? Well, I don't know where I got this map from, but it's very telling. This is not just one power, it's one of the great powers of India. Like the introduction of Mr. Borker earlier said, the country is thousands of years old, lots of experience, lots of smart people. The difference between, the world has learned many things from India, including the number 0. There would be no computers without it. So why is it that India has not done anything in semiconductors so far? Well, we'll try to understand that question and see if there are potential solutions. So, but to do that, other countries have started from 0. Taiwan and Korea were one of them. China started from 0 15 years ago. They're doing very well. So it makes sense to try to understand what other countries have done if they decided they want to get into semiconductors for national security reasons. So this is one approach, which has been the US approach so far. Yeah, it's also been the United Kingdom's approach, but for some reason, no United Kingdom entrepreneur ever actually made it. But this approach says innovation drives business success. You cannot be a Me Too company and be an entrepreneur. You have to innovate and disrupt. You have to have a fundamental technology differentiation. And you have to show the customer that you offer a 10 times greater benefit than the established competition. And it has to be cheaper as well. That can only happen if you have some fundamental technology differentiation which disrupts the existing market. The other approach, which is quite the opposite of the entrepreneur approach, is sugar daddy approach. So who can be a sugar daddy? Can be a government, or it can be a conglomerate. So the entrepreneur doesn't have to worry about raising money. Why is it hard to be an entrepreneur? The first thing is you have to figure out how to pay the salaries of people, including your own, or how to eat. So you don't have to worry about that if the government puts up the money, or they say, okay, in the case of Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Corporation, the world's largest, Morris Chang is known as the person, but Morris Chang was part of the government at the time. He convinced the government to put 47% of the capital, and the government helped him convince Philips to put 27% of the capital, and then the many private investors came for the remaining 20%. So government's financial anchor and government's soft power in convincing a foreign multinational to put up money was the secret of how TSMC was born. Okay, the rest then, to Morris Chang's credit, he's built a great company. He invested that money well, but he would never have gotten the money to build a huge factory. You need billions. Well, at that time you didn't need billions. At that time you needed 500 million. So TSMC's first fab was $500 million. It was founded in 1987. And they didn't have much technology. They used to come to us to learn. So this is the typical sugar daddy approach: unlimited money and time, which an entrepreneur never has; sustain losses without worries of running out of cash; license Me Too products from somewhere, pay for it; buy foreign companies and hope for the best; and then sell on price to gain, sell a Me Too product at a cheaper price, which is was the way Taiwan, Korea, etc. started. Europe, well, the European approach as well as the Japanese approach, there were already these large conglomerates: Nippon Electric Company, Hitachi, Toshiba, Fujitsu. So don't mind the spelling. There was a very powerful government organization called Ministry of Industry and Trade. They guided these companies, they gave them money, and of course Japan was the world leader in semiconductor manufacturing in the 80s. In fact, there was a lot of geopolitics between the United States and Japan at the time. And American lawyers won, and they basically put a lot of problems to the Japanese. And over a period of time, the Japanese lost their power. And in fact, all these companies were merged into a single company called Renaissance. So Japan has no more semiconductor companies today. And all the memory portions, the DRAM, the Micron purchased them for hardly any money. Okay, and then there were government in Europe. There's Infineon, which is ex-Siemens. There's in Italy, there was ST Microelectronics. They started from 1953, 1952, 1979. So ST is the merger of Thomson and SGS. They have existed for 50 years. Okay, after 50 years of continuous government investment and losses, okay, you can build a semiconductor company. Maybe that's what, I don't know what will happen in India, but we don't have to take such an expensive route and wait for 50 years. Let's hope not. And the European governments have been funding. These are various European programs. The latest one is CHIPS Act, which is 50 billion. The European government has been funding their semiconductor companies forever. Then you have the approach of sugar daddy, which puts the dollars, but they also provide infrastructure. So it's not just money. They help create infrastructure. And they also help, they try to identify an entrepreneur type of person to lead it. And this, well, the CEO of, the son of the Samsung founder, who became the CEO later, Lee Kun-hee, if you read the story of how Samsung got into the semiconductor industry, they started in fact in Silicon Valley. They rented a small space. They purchased a license from Micron Technology, because at that time Micron was a small startup. They paid them $5 million. They licensed the R&D. They licensed the product, built a factory, and then the rest is history. Today, Samsung is one of the top 3 semiconductor companies in the world, but they started from zero. And so the approach clearly worked, but it was not just a question of the government giving money. They provided infrastructure. The government created Korea Semiconductor Inc., which was later bought by Samsung, but this created the talent pool. Because where do you find expert engineers to even know what machines to buy? So the government provided not just money. They certainly gave Samsung money, but Samsung had enough of its own. It was a huge conglomerate by itself. And Taiwan, similarly, in 1980, United Microelectronics, Robert Tsao was the semi-government guy, and this is the world's second largest contract manufacturing company after TSMC. So he really started the business and created the pool of manpower in Taiwan. He was originally from mainland China, and so was Maurice Chang. In 1987, Maurice Chang started. Okay, so, but they had a lot of government support, and the Electronics Research Services Organization was started by the government in 1975. They had a small R&D wafer fab facility. Industrial Technology Research Institute, 1973. They created the Hsinchu Science Park. So the government provided not only money, but they provided soft power support, and they bet on entrepreneurs who were smart. So certainly Maurice Chang has done a good job. Robert Tsao has done a good job. Mr. Lee Kun-hee has also done a fantastic job. And also these were obviously the family owners of Samsung and Hyundai. But to their credit, they have built great semiconductor activities. They run it like a military style, but they built a great company. So China, how about China? So this is on a topic on everybody's mind, including the United States and Europe. So the Ministry of Finance in China took a decision that we have to get into semiconductors. The government took a decision. The State Council of the People's Republic of China met and took a decision that they have to get into semiconductors because it's a national security issue, that they cannot depend on American semiconductors for their weapon systems because they have superpower ambitions. So they decided we will do whatever it takes to get into semiconductors and go big. So it's not just an experiment. Whatever it costs, they will do it. So Ministry of Finance instructed the China Development Bank, which created something called the Sino-IC. IC stands for Integrated Circuit Capital, to fund only semiconductors. China Integrated Circuit Fund, they launched the first big fund in 2014, and they've just launched the third big fund. So all this, officially, this is 150 billion. In my opinion, the real number may be even 300 billion. So the Chinese government funding, these are huge factories. I mean, SMIC is not very far behind Taiwan Semiconductor Management. They are at 7 nanometers. TSMC Apple chips are at 3 nanometers. Okay, so they are not very far. So what has the US done? They have blocked the sale of the lithography equipment. They have blocked the sale of the deposition equipment. They have blocked the sale of any equipment that is available from the United States. They have blocked. Now, will that work? I'm not so sure. It'll delay them because the Chinese industry has started to develop their own manufacturing equipment. So it may slow them down, that's for sure. So China is under sanctions right now, semiconductor sanctions by the United States government, and Europe has to follow. But they are already very big players in flash memory and DRAM memory. They're supplying their own needs for sure. So as I said, they are at 7 nanometers today. It's the world's third largest foundry, and they say they will be at 5 nanometers by 2025. So, sorry for the spelling. This is the Chinese approach, as I already talked about it. I won't go into it anymore. But only to point out that they entrusted Richard Chang, a guy called Richard Chang, who had worked for 20 years at Texas Instruments. So he's US educated and knows very well the semiconductor business. They brought him back to China. But he's a hands-on PhD in electrical engineering. He was not a corporate manager type. Simon Yang used to work at Intel. He started Yangtze. So the Chinese government, in these 3 companies, they entrusted very accomplished or very hands-on, not corporate type, US experienced workers to come and lead their charge. Okay, so these are some of the approaches. So now, having understood a little bit about what other countries have done to get into semiconductors once a decision has been made. So the first important thing is you have to take the decision. Is this a national priority or not? If not, well then it won't happen anyway. Of course, a country like India has many issues, many problems. So it would be immoral to suggest that the government should only worry about semiconductors. But the government did worry about a space program 50 years ago, and India did land a module on the moon. It was a great success at much lower cost. So India is a software superpower, but that does not require much investment. And it started by the Y2K problem of offering cheap, educated labor. So the Indian context is very different. Can they follow any of those approaches? I don't know. But here is the actual situation. Here is the actual situation in India today. We have to understand that India would start from zero. I mean, I have built India's first chip design center for ST Microelectronics, not myself. I did have some boutique design companies also in Noida, a couple of hundred people. But so I speak from experience, having worked and managed and recruited large Indian teams in semiconductor designs and also training them. But to make a full product that's manufacturable, India would be starting from zero. That's my opinion. Because those engineers have limited knowledge on a small piece of the puzzle. Extreme capital intensity, I don't know if the Indian government or even conglomerates in India have this kind of money. However, what India does have is soft power. Indian government can through their foreign ministers, through their various international visits, India has many advantages. There is excess cash available in oil and gas producing regions of the world. Saudi Arabia has a $300 billion fund which they don't know what to do with. Similarly, there are many other oil and gas producing regions, and India has good relations with all of them. So a partnership with somebody who has the cash, supported by the government and its soft power, Indians are trusted in those countries, is one possible viable approach. I don't know. The breadth and depth of semiconductor talent is actually the biggest issue. India would have to rely on bringing in expatriates, which is what Taiwan did, which is what Korea did, which is what, they would pay any price, but they would get the right hands-on type of engineering people, not hi-fi corporate managers. Okay, if you get hi-fi corporate managers, it will go into a bureaucratic situation. There are cultural and technical, there are cultural issues in the Indian psyche that, being technical is not considered, is not glorified. I think. So there is the mindset, having recruited people from college, having trained them, having built them up, basically you can hire as many smart people as you want, IIT toppers, whatever. After a few years, they want to be a manager. So if everybody is a manager, who's doing the work? Who's doing the high-end engineering? And so once one Indian guy in Silicon Valley told me that I'm going to go, I don't want to do design or fabrication, that, I'll go into product engineering, wahan kursi jaldi milti hai. So that sums it up, that, it's a manageable problem because there are many smart people. I think it's just a question of inculcating the right cultural traits, at least for this type of precision work. And of course, global competition. If India does not compete globally, it won't happen. You have to target for export market only. So this is the actual situation in India today, which I've already talked about, so I won't go into. Manufacturing, the experience is zero. In design, there is some experience. There's a large people volume, but no commercial product. They're mainly services to foreign companies or foreign customers. This is a chart that I came up with myself. So this is my personal perspective, having worked and lived on 3 continents. So this should say 1980s to 2024, okay? So the first number is in the 80s, and the second number is in 2024. So you can see that the skill set of US manufacturing has gone from 10 to 5, because in the 80s, 90% of the semiconductor manufacturing industry was in Silicon Valley. Today, by the way, there is not one single silicon manufacturing facility. The last wafer fab of Intel shut down in 2008. So there is no silicon in Silicon Valley. A more appropriate name today might be Software Valley, Amazon Valley, Twitter Valley, Google Valley, but not Silicon Valley. All the silicon is coming from Taiwan or Korea. So, and these 5, I'm being generous here, because, Intel right now is in a very bad shape. Technologically, they are way behind Samsung and Taiwan Semiconductor. I think there are many reasons for their decline. I have a personal opinion, which, they appointed a chief financial officer as the CEO because the previous CEO got accused of sexual harassment or something. So when highly technical enterprises start to get led by financial people, that is the biggest mistake you could ever make. So now Pat Gelsinger, who used to be previously the CTO, has come in. He has decided to go into manufacturing in a big way. But the only products they have are processors, and they have been milking those processors for 30, 40 years since the PC was born. So they don't have new products because they became very bureaucratic. They became like a government organization. So their technology is not good, and this is likely to go down further. Skill set in design, okay, they're still designing processors. I think 9 is generous. I'm not sure it's really 9, it might be even 4 or 5. The precision culture has gone down, the work ethic has gone down, discipline has gone down, productivity has gone down, quality has gone down, innovation has had a big setback, is gone from 10 to 3. That's a personal opinion. So what are 50,000 people doing? They are pushing papers back and forth and having committee meetings. They're being meeting to death. I mean, I've worked on Intel before. So again, I have similarly put a perspective for Japan, Taiwan, Korea, China, India, and the European Union. Okay, European Union, thanks to 50 years of government funding, is actually in a very reasonably good shape, but they've taken 50 years of losses. You know, after 50 years, you'll come up with something, and there are a lot of smart engineers, and they have a good university system. So I think Indians are smart. I mean, Indians are not lacking in brain power. So Indians are not lacking in innovation. Among thousands of people, there are X number of superstars. You know, now whether they are given the opportunities or recognized, that's another question. Yes, sir. Yes. Yeah, we are almost.
No, I'm just saying that there are a lot of Indians working worldwide who add to the innovation also.
Certainly. I mean, I've tried to make it as well thought out, then you could argue with my heuristic numbers. You know, I just picked a number. So what the question arises, what can any government do if they want to get into semiconductors? And in this case, we are talking in India. So let's talk about India. So if national priority is to get into silicon manufacturing, well, the government, apart from just purely money, could do many things. This number 3 may seem like a non-issue, but I can tell you, as soon as the CHIPS Act was passed in the United States, as soon as the CHIPS Act was passed in Europe, which is very recent, like I'm talking about 6, 8, 9 months, all kinds of people have come up with the hat in hand for this government money. That somebody who knows nothing about semiconductors says, oh, I'm going to build a semiconductor plant. So some NGO will crop up and say, I'm going to set up a semiconductor institute. So every government in the world, when they approve a budget, all kinds of scamsters come in and say, I'm going to do semiconductors too. So, so this is my thought. You cannot build a semiconductor industry unless you build profitable enterprises. It cannot be just a government operation with no profit motive. Then you'll end up like Semiconductor Complex. Well, Semiconductor Complex was Dr. Zarabi, who was the MD there. And I had the pleasure of meeting him even in Silicon Valley when I was a student. I think even at that time, the government had undercapitalized semiconductor complex. That was one of the problems. But then I don't know what sort of bureaucracy he had to face. In the end, it was not a success, but you have to build profitable enterprises. Only profitable enterprises can create a growing ecosystem in a new industry. So, and to me, the simple-minded recipe is you need the support of government, not only financial, but much more, including the soft power, including prioritization, including eliminating the bureaucracy. Government can help raise private capital. Government can go to Saudi Arabia and say, hey, we are putting X if you put Y. And of course, you know, if all our engineers, all the engineers in the world haven't become corporate vice presidents, then this is a key ingredient. So these are the key ingredients. Now, how you put them together, I mean, these are some of India's strengths. I think it's worthwhile to talk about them. So India is the world's #1 in production of babies. Nobody can match India in the production of people. And so having a lot of people makes for, because verification of a high complexity 100 billion transistor chip. I would not be surprised if the NVIDIA chip was actually not verified in India. They have a design center here. So it's very labor intensive. Of course, you need design automation tools. But it's similar to software. It requires people volume, and it's a cultural fit with the Indian psyche. So that's a competitive advantage for India, for sure. I think this is an underestimated issue, but China is under sanctions, and India is a trusted security partner. It's not sanctioned. It has full access to everything. Now the question is, you know, can that be taken advantage of? But that is definitely a competitive advantage for India as compared to China. Can India become a, to answer the question, can India become a semiconductor powerhouse? Well, if it were me taking the decisions, which it is not, and I doubt it will ever be, what would I do? I would focus on one thing, which is a single product can fill multiple factories of $35 billion each, because it makes no sense to have a $35 billion factory if you don't have a product to run that is competitive and for which there is not a worldwide demand, that you can compete with the best in the world, which are those memory manufacturers are only 3 right now: Samsung, Hyundai, and Micron. India will have to be able to compete with them on a global scale. And then, but what's nice about it is a memory chip is a cross-discipline of many things. It's suitable to the Indian spiritual, philosophic ability to crystallize many complex things together. I would focus on memory and disrupt the largest part of the semiconductor market, which is today 200 billion, and it's going to be $500 billion, and it will end up being $1 trillion, because every data center, every cell phone, every PC, everything needs memory. Even the human mind needs memory. Artificial intelligence is all about memory. So, but what do you need to do? Focus on technology innovation, and then a single product can fill multiple factories, and you better need to be able to fill a factory. So again, I won't bore you with why I think memory is good. I already mentioned it, but it's a very large part of the chip market. They are the engines of all these applications. These are, okay, you know, the world's first memory was a 1 kilobit DRAM. It was invented by Intel. Intel lost the game These are the, I've just listed the various memory revolutions. There's not a lot of them. 2 or 3 of them I have contributed to personally. In the case of SanDisk, for example, of course, I mean, I built the division for ST Microelectronics for flash. However, Eli Harari was the entrepreneur behind SanDisk, and he did a great job. SanDisk, unfortunately, does not exist, though. So I would say focus on a single product, innovate, disrupt a large existing market, get enough volume. This is an area that's ripe for picking because there's an opportunity for innovation here. And so I would say, if I were the government, I would say whole of government approach. I don't know if that's possible in a complex political system such as India, but you know, it is easier in a small country like Korea or Taiwan, in a large complex country like India, but unless there's a whole of government approach, it will not happen. Provide institutional support, help mobilize private capital, and this idea I already mentioned. There is the talent bottleneck, which I think is important to keep in mind, and a solution will need to be found. Again, if I were the government, I would mobilize semiconductor education in a big way in all these 3 areas, maybe create something like the Indian Institutes of Technology for Microelectronics. So starting from 0 is not easy. There is no shortcut to success. I'm concluding here now. However, the laws of some famous people, I don't know who they were, somebody says it was Isaac Newton. Somebody says it was Einstein. In any case, the laws of physics are certainly no different, no matter what the frame of reference is or where we are. So if they can do it, we can do it. And that concludes my talk. Thank you.
I think it's been a not only a mind-blowing but mind-boggling kind of a presentation, Rahul. Be here now. You'll have to answer some questions. Okay. Now I want to put to you the first one. You talked of brutal capital investment. Okay. Now, how much do you think India needs to invest in the short term and in the long term for the next 5 years or something? You know, because the government lasts for 5 years. You see. So Modi government, how much does it have to invest immediately if we have to get your plan going?
I would commit.
Yeah, you've got the mic. Yeah.
I would commit 50 billion immediately.
50 billion
Yes.
US dollars.
Yes. And with a plan to go 250 billion by the end of the present government's term. That's what I would do.
It's I think, mind-boggling.
So it needs to be given enough momentum.
Huh? Huh?
I'm just reminded of India's HRD budget for that sake. How much is that in billions? Nothing.
And then before we open it, now who would be our immediate competitor from this 50 billion to 250 billion? China, is it?
Well, China is the obvious competitor, but I mean, China is already leaps and bounds ahead. And they are, in fact, a serious competitor to the United States and Europe.
So it's a no-go there. Now we'll open it. Go ahead. Mike, Dena.
Thank you. That was brilliant, really comprehensive. But I'm wondering about 2 things. Of course, we could discuss many things. But one is, you haven't really talked about the environmental cost. There are huge investments in electricity, water, and other resources. And India doesn't have a surplus of it. So how do you resolve that? And then secondly, are you advising that India should go the way of the OSAT?
The way of
OSAT, you know.
OSAT?
Yeah, you know, overseas.
Assembly and test?
Yeah.
It's not that cheap anymore.
I know. But then that's the thing. Isn't it better? Because I see a lot of Indian states are betting on fabless factories, you know, fabless What do you think about that approach? Thank you.
I personally don't know. I mean, if our defense and weapon systems depend on chips, if we are dependent on those proprietary security-oriented chips to third parties, that's a question for the government, any government to decide. Possibly the friendly relations with the friendly countries will continue forever, so maybe India does not need to worry. Focusing on assembly and test is maybe a lower capital investment approach, but the lowest capital investment approach, I mean, to start with, is you come up with a disruptive solution for the existing memory market. Once you have the product, you can build all the fabs in the world. The investment makes sense because you'll make huge profits.
Yeah.
And the capital is there to mobilize if the government applies its soft power.
Please make it very crisp and short. We're running out of time.
India is not lacking in financial geniuses. India is not lacking in soft power. India has very good relationships with people who have the capital. So it's all possible.
No, but in your paradigm, you don't want managers and these MBA types to control. You want the science scribes to control, isn't it? Am I right?
Well, I mean, first of all, whenever I got a resume from an MBA, I would immediately throw it in the trash bin. I'm not sure what an MBA teaches you. I mean, it's management is a common sense and character issue. So glorifying this degree, which was invented, I don't know where. I mean, I don't think it's really a serious subject. So I would not hire.
So basically, it's the glint in the eye which has to come. Huh?
No, I mean, there are a lot of smart people who go into the MBA, and it can teach you certain tools. But I mean, if you want to learn those tools, take a course in finance or and accounting and things like that.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Rahul Sud, for this wonderful
No,
explanation.
let's come to the question.
Yeah.
I mean, the thankings and all, we can go out.
But you have portrayed the picture that the very first slide that what is required for the semiconductor powerhouse is this getting the complexity, science, hard science, as well as the brutal capital. And then thereafter, in another slide, you listed out certain points for the Indian semiconductor market. Now,
Yes, sir.
in all these, what I feel, the picture is very pessimistic for India. However, the government is keen in adopting the semiconductor mission. So the current approach is to give subsidy. They have committed roughly 76,000 crore rupees for this, a few $1 billion. What do you say about that approach? Because we have invited the foreign semiconductor majors to set up the shop here. Now, tomorrow, when the sanctions come, because we are independent foreign policy nation, considering the world where the one side is China, Russia, and another side is US, we are taking no sides. Now, tomorrow some sanctions come and then they back out with the kind of technology they bring. What will happen then?
So I read about the initiative taken by Tata Group. They have made a deal with let's say medium technology power electronics chip company. I mean, these are chips which do not require cutting edge manufacturing. They are like 65 nanometers. So it's several generations and decades old technology. Now, if Power Chip, which is a small Taiwanese player, primarily focused on the electric vehicle market, and I mean, Tata has an internal market for automotive chips. So using that old technology for automotive chips could be of some potential benefit to Tata itself. Maybe they will supply some of the production back to Power Chip. For power chip, it's like a free factory. So this is not the world's most advanced technology, and it certainly they are far behind as compared to Infineon and ST Microelectronics in power semiconductors. So power semiconductors are moving towards new innovative technologies like silicon carbide and so forth. So I think it might serve the purpose of Tata. I think it might serve the purpose of training some people, getting, let's say, our feet wet in bringing up some engineers in manufacturing. Whether those engineers then look for the kursi in the future, I don't know.
Yeah, I think we must have some
Okay.
gender balance. Go ahead.
Yeah, hi, it was really fascinating. And just two things. One, I'm curious about the actual evolution of materials, because it seems like we've just been stuck on the same substrate for the manufacture of chips. So, I mean, one is hearing about silicon carbide now, but surely there's been evolution or not in new materials that are being used for semiconductors. And secondly, on a sentimental side note, I was a little bit, puzzled by your constantly saying zero, starting from zero, etc. Because my late father, Dr. Gurpreet Singh, started Continental Device more than 60 years ago and was a pioneer in the field of semiconductors in India. So every time you said, we have had nothing here, it just rankled a bit. So anyway, I'm also curious about the evolution of materials, if you can address that. Yeah.
Well, I remember Continental Devices.
Yeah.
I think it was in Narayana or
Yes,
somewhere,
and
right?
they've reinvented themselves with silicon carbide, in fact.
I think at the time, Continental, I mean, there was very early in the game. I wish Continental Devices had evolved and followed the technology roadmap. At some point, it disappeared, but let's get it back on the map. But for the time when they started, they were actually very advanced.
Are you helming it now?
No, I'm just,
So, but I mean, I'm a poor engineer, so my perspective is always based on feet on the ground today. And the reality of today, if you want to go into advanced semiconductor manufacture, because if you don't go into advanced, you're nobody anyway.
just from the sidelines, hasn't the material evolved in any way?
I'm afraid there have been many attempts.
Germanium never went anywhere.
The first transistor was invented in Bell Labs on germanium. So Bill Shockley, Walter Bratton, Bardeen, they got the Nobel Prize for that invention. And the integrated circuit was putting many of those together. But they moved to silicon thereafter because germanium is not very amenable to the manufacturing processes that silicon is
Rahul,
able
I
to
think
do.
we'll have to pick up the next one.
So-
Yeah, go ahead.
So, ciao Rahul, come stai? Grazie
Bene,
mille
grazie
for the
molto.
thing. I know you
Parla
speak
italiano?
I know you speak Italian because the ST Microelectronics that you mentioned, I started my career under you in that organization. So
Under me?
yes, I was not in NVG. I was in Central R&D. I worked in the basic hardcore research, and but I learned a lot from you during those days when you were there in that office. I also worked in the Milan office. That's why I speak a little Italian. But
Rahul, by the way, has an Italian wife.
so, but then I followed
Since
you.
25 years.
Yeah, but then I followed you to University of California and Stanford and have my patents. But sir, I wanted to ask you here today that you didn't mention about Russia. Russia continues to be a defense superpower, and semiconductors plays a big role. So I was just wondering if you had any views on how Russia is continuing to be at the edge, especially in avionics, and they give they play a pretty strong role internationally. So what are your views, sir?
Yes, sir. So Russia has a lot of inherent strengths, just like India. The most fundamental of which is mathematical ability. So they are very good abstract thinkers. They are very good in mathematics. They're very good in physics. That's why they were able to launch the first spacecraft and go into space and so forth. the Russians created one government company called Angstrom, which is similar to angstrom. It's a unit of measure for atomic level devices. They created a second company called Micron, M-I-K-R-O-N. Both of these are 40, 50-year-old companies. But for some reason, possibly due to the Cold War, possibly due to sanctions, they never got beyond a certain level. So their technology is far behind. However, as far as their weapon systems, they use TSMC. They have, in fact, a very strong relationship with China. And as long as it lasts, they don't have a problem with their weapon systems.
Can we go to the next one?
Yes.
Yeah.
Very short question, and
Yes.
this is specifically to India's semiconductor challenges, and India aspiring to become a semiconductor powerhouse, and this is based on your views. So as soon as you said that the Indian talent mostly tries to be aspiring for a managerial position, and then who works with the hands. So today in the Financial Times, there was a report that when Chinese highly trained engineers want to work in India, they apply for visa, especially for semiconductor industries. Indian government has turned down their visas. So does this, as you as an expert, after you have shown so many of Chinese prowess in this field, declining their visas when they want to work for India at reasonable price, salary, does it augur well when you specifically say that Indians have limited design visions, and most of them, even if they want, they just want to aspire for managerial positions, unlike Chinese, and who want to come to and work in India, but because of geopolitics, the Indian government has denied visa requests. Today's Financial Times report. So what do you comment?
I think a pertinent fact to your question, sir, is where would these Chinese engineers work? There are no semiconductor factories in India. So I'm not sure what they would do with their hands. The only jobs available in India are design. And those roles are well served by vast volumes of Indians themselves. As far as the government policy on Chinese engineers, I cannot speak to that. So I have no idea what the complexity of motives might be behind that. I mean, probably the foreign ministry might have.
Yeah, very brief, please,
Yeah,
very
yeah.
brief now.
Rahul,
Yes, sir.
you may be knowing Raghuram Rajan. He was a IIT graduate, and later on he was a RBI governor also. He was critical about the semiconductor industry in India, and he was countered by Minister Vaishnav also, Ashwin Vaishnav. So he was saying India should not invest in this type of semiconductor industry. World has gone ahead of us, and we can't compete. And we should invest that amount in our primary education. That will give boost to our economy later on and industry later on.
Fine. Okay. Yeah, just pass.
But what would be your question, sir?
Whether India should invest in semiconductor or primary education.
He's putting it totally off. I mean,
Well, I think the primary education, sir, is extremely important. Nothing should come at the cost of primary education, that's for sure.
Okay. What I'd like to...
In fact, I would like to add to that education with semiconductor curriculum and maybe additional institutes that focus and motivate young people to get into a highly technical career and provide equivalent salaries to the technical ladder as the managerial ladder, and provide the same level of honor and status to the technical entrepreneurs.
I'd like to ask you about the necessity in semiconductor, even in semiconductor design, how integrated is it or interrelated is it with manufacturing process? The reason I ask this question is 20 years ago, I followed the industry in China, Korea, and this, and an area. I'm also a PhD from Stanford and in electrical engineering. But what 20 years ago in India and China, in chip design, India was considered ahead for a whole variety. There are attributes, and there have been economic studies on that. Today, we are far behind. The big difference has been, and I can cite you some references, that the Indians were all designing for multinationals. And we were designing sort of very outsourced, very narrow tasks.
Small pieces of chips. Not the complete chip.
We were providing sort of simple labor. While the Chinese, and there are studies on it, as I said, were basically designing for Chinese companies. And they may have been low technologically then, but today they've gone up. As a result, their design capabilities have also increased. And we know that semiconductor industry is one where there is, you can't do the tools unless you understand the processes. Why is NVIDIA is not just because they have access to things, they have the software, etc. So India for a long time has been concentrating, thinking that we can have an entry through chip design. And my thing is that I think that's not likely to happen. Would you agree with that, or do you think we can do it?
So you remember my three-legged stool, which requires physics, design, and testing. These are the three legs to the stool. Testing includes, let's say, the OSAT packaging and all that also. But if any one of these legs is broken, the stool will not stand. So in India, we don't have any manufacturing. In fact, in Silicon Valley, you don't have any manufacturing. I was visiting my former professor at Stanford, Jim Plummer. Maybe you know him. And I was surprised to see that there is no semiconductor fab in Stanford anymore. It used to have one of the best fabs in Silicon Valley, industrial grade. I have processed and carried wafers in that fab personally for my work. Didn't exist anymore. Then I asked him, I said, how about the microelectronics curriculum? So he said, Rahul, there are no jobs in semiconductor manufacturing. In fact, the demand for teaching is in software because there are no factories. So this problem exists as well in the United States. Never mind India, which has absolutely no factories. At least in United States, you have Intel, and then you have some foreign you have Texas Instruments and you have Samsung. But they are United States has less than 10% of the world silicon production today.
I think we'll have to now close with just two last.
I want to ask, very brief, I'll be very brief. You were talking about the ecosystem to grow in India. So do you feel that the education for this semiconductor to the primary level and more we can focus on creating technical aspects of it in our education? Do you feel that companies like Tata, who has a very good ethics and all those things, can come with government would be successful format regarding this field?
In my personal opinion, education, especially technical education, is the base of success. So motivating people, young people, all from the time that they are children, to get into this very beautiful technology. I mean, my passion for it developed when I was 10 years old because my father, he was in the army, and he was an instructor at the Military College of Telecom Engineering. This was and I was a little boy. He took me one day to the electronics laboratory, and one of the instructors there, he said, you see that blackboard? You see all these transistors there? It was a huge blackboard. He says, the Americans have found a way to put all of that on something this size. And this was like around 1960 or so, 1963. So this gave me the passion that I was fascinated by it, and I studied all my life and directed all my education to get into this. So I think inculcating this desire in starting from very young children to high school to creating Institute of Microelectronics network, like the IITs. This is the most fundamental, and this is a very doable contribution which the government can make, and it will benefit all the people. Then innovation will follow, and some of them will be smart enough to raise the capital from the Middle East and actually put something in India. The cost of electricity and water is very much an environmental issue. Therein is a choice on whether you want to do it or not, but that is the cost.
I think the gentleman who wanted to ask has left, is it? There was one gentleman sitting here. He's gone. Oh, you are the one? Yeah, give him the mic. Why are you shifting places?
Is
Okay,
there
go
any
ahead.
ancillary thing which can be exported from after manufacturing in India and exported to those, Taiwan and other countries regarding the semiconductor?
I think he's an entrepreneur, is it?
No, I am not entrepreneur.
No, but it's important to know his background. Well, this question is a little.
No, I am an engineer, sir.
Engineer?
Yeah.
Okay, then you got the pass. Go to
Well, I can't think of any products to export to Taiwan, but in meetings with several Taiwanese CEOs, they welcome Indian engineers to come and work for them.
Thank you. Okay. Sir, one little question. Can you open Institute of Microelectronics in the Greater Noida as you have established the ST Microelectronics for the other companies?
I think it's a great idea. There should be one opened in Greater Noida. There should be, it should have affiliate offices all over Delhi.
I can help little bit, sir.
Okay, I think we can do that later. Okay.
Yeah.
No, I think we'll have to close now,
there
I'm
would
sorry.
be a huge demand for it. I'm quite sure.
So I think we are running out of time now. Sorry. Yeah. No, but that's the whole idea. We want him to come back. Okay.
Sir, we have design courses.
No, can we just sorry now? Can we just close now? Thank you, Rahul, for this great job. I think he needs a standing ovation. I say, you must. I mean, it's a great thing. And then, I'm reminded of that. We are looking for superstars. You know what he said? 15th August 1983. So I think we should start with that. We should look for superstars. Thank you, Rahul. Thank you very much.
There's X number.
Yeah, thank you. Can we have a copy of the presentation on IIT website? Yeah, we'll do. No, it's online. So we'll send you the link. You've entered your
Suhas.
on the register.
So I was there.
No, on the
19. I graduated from modern school, Barab Road in 70.